This episode is brought to you by GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco. Get the most out of your vehicle with GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco original equipment. The only parts designed, engineered, tested, and backed by General Motors. You can find your perfect fit for most makes and models and choose from 3 tiers of parts, including GM OE or gold and silver aftermarket parts. Visit gmparts.com for more information.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us, our good friend, esteemed colleague, great lawyer, advocate, essayist, Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Gentlemen, I want to begin by talking about Trump, Donald Trump, and Elon Musk's war against the bureaucracy and overregulation and overspending. So let me preface by saying so much money is wasted. A lot of it is misused. We're now learning that a lot of this money is abused. What do I mean by that? It's going to these NGOs, these non-government organizations, which are sweetheart deals. They're funded by the Congress. Turns out a lot of the people who are getting funded are political friends or operatives or associates or contributors to the Democratic Party. So taxpayer dollars, Jesse and Eric, being used to funnel and support, develop, and expand the infrastructure of the Democratic Party. And you're not talking about a few $1 million, which to me is all the money in the world. And you're not talking about tens of millions. You're not even talking about hundreds of millions, but you're talking about in the billions of money that is misused. Most recently, you found that wonderful woman, that election denier, Stacey Abrams, twice failed gubernatorial candidate in the state of Georgia, she had this thing where she got millions into billions of dollars for all kinds of advocacy groups for climate change. She doesn't know the first thing about climate change. The money was moved to her political operations and her political friends, and she was making money off the deal. I think her income out of it was something like $2.3 billion. So we made this political hack, this failed politician, this self-aggrandizing opportunist, Stacey Abrams, a multi-millionaire, perhaps billionaire, by paying her off with your money, Jesse, Eric's money, your money, and my money, and everybody else's money. What the hell is wrong with that? Trump and Musk are going after that kind of stuff. And you have overregulation. You have too many regulations. So Trump is said to all these people, before you go out and start doing your rulemaking, I want to have it cleared by White House counsel and reviewed. Okay. And they're suing on that. They're trying to stop him from doing that oversight, which is his responsibility as the chief executive under Article 2 of the United States Constitution. And he wants to fire people. So they go into court. And you have this judge in the United States District Court named Amy Berman Jackson. And what does she do? She issues a temporary restraining order to stop the fellow who was like the chief counsel to the office, which was responsible for clearing the firing of a whole bunch of agencies and departments, stopped him from being firing. So therefore, thousands and thousands and thousands of people were supposed to be on the termination list. They can't be fired. And she's delayed it and played around with it, so much so that what happened? Trump is now delayed in his ability to weed out the undesirables, the people who are on a free lunch, who don't even come to work because of this judge, and she has no right to do this under the powers granted to her to the Constitution. These are executive powers granted to Trump. And to his credit, the Chief Justice of the United States stayed one of these stupid, ridiculous orders, which will allow them to go forward and do other attacks on the deep state, the bureaucracy. Eric, your thoughts?
Well, I think the majority of the American people agree that there's a tremendous amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in the United States government, and it needs to be curtailed. And I think the general concept of DOGE, people accept. I think to the extent that there are objections to it amongst the American people, some of it is, and I think reasonably so, occasionally Musk oversteps his bounds. And you don't just have to listen to me. Go listen to FBI Director Kash Patel. When Musk issued this order that all federal employees had to write what they did over the last 2 weeks or last 3 weeks, and if they failed to do it, it would be considered a resignation. Kash Patel, to his credit, issued a statement to the FBI saying, "I'm your boss. I'm in charge. Don't listen to Musk. You follow my directives." So there has to be. So we need a little bit more of the right hand needs to know what the left hand is doing. But I think certainly the concept behind Doge is a really good one, because we do have to scale back spending, because it's not a revenue problem for the federal government. Tax funds just keep coming in. Tax revenue comes in hand over fist. It's just the expenditures we have to get our arms around. And the point you were making about this one judge that comes out and says, a district court judge, who comes out and says that the federal government can't fire these people. Well, that I think breaks out the difference between how Republicans view the role of judges and how Democrats view the roles of judges. Republicans, for the most part, view the judge's role within the United States Constitution as people calling balls and strikes and deciding the law and what it says, and enforcing it irrespective of where the law leads you. The Democrats view the judiciary as a legislature of last resort. If we can't get something done through Congress, through the legislative process, or if we lose an election, let's go running into court and have the court, which is wholly unelected, wholly undemocratic, they will step in and they will force the elected officials, in this case the Trump administration, to do their bidding. I expect that that's going to be overruled. To the point that you were making regarding Chief Justice Roberts, the appellate court, the circuit court, I think was the 9th, but I'm not certain. One of the circuit courts issued an order demanding that the Trump administration spend foreign aid. And Justice Roberts stayed that decision and says, until we have a final determination on the merits of the case, the Trump administration cannot be forced to spend foreign aid. Now, that's really critically important, because in the sphere of foreign policy, the Constitution is very clear that it is the chief executive, it is the president who determines America's foreign policy. And foreign aid is integral to foreign policy. So if the president says you don't like, if the president does something you don't like, you can vote him out the next time around. That's the democratic, what the democratic process is all about. But that foreign policy decisions are to be made by the executive branch. Now, on these other expenditures, domestically, Congress has a greater role in determining how money is spent domestically. They have the power of the purse. Now, when you say the power of the purse, I think it's perversion to say the power of the purse in foreign policy is that the court can force the president to spend money. That doesn't make any sense. But when it comes to domestic spending, Constitution envisions a much larger role for Congress and their exercise of the power of the purse. And there the court may be within its rights to force the president to spend money that had been earmarked for a particular policy, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, or some other public health issue. But there's a big difference between a court interceding, first of all, to overrule the legislature. The second is to step into the role of the president. And the third is to blend together or blur the distinction between foreign policy and domestic policy. So I think we're going to see this fight is going to go on for a while between what is the proper role of the court, and hopefully the constitutional one, as I see it, lines up with the Republicans, that the judiciary is they call balls and strikes, the law is the law, and that's how they're going to enforce it. And hopefully that vision is ascendant.
Jesse, what are your thoughts?
I agree with both of you. I think you described the courts as the way we look at it, and the way it was constituted in our Constitution as that part of the government, the triad, that calls balls and strikes to make sure that we are staying within the bounds of the law. But if you look at this type of situation, even the attacks that Musk and Trump are getting from the Democratic opponents, which are not really mustering, in the first month of his administration, Americans polled. Now, this is a poll that's coming out of Harvard Capps Harris, which is, certainly not one of those, conservative-minded polling. Said in the first month, the direction of the country going positive has increased by 14 points. But let's be specifically about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. 60% of the respondents, 60% of the people believe that DOGE is helping to make a major cuts in government expenditures that are needed. And 77% support a full examination of government expenditures. This is a case where the Democrats and the legacy media and all the opponents on the left are going crazy because they're not accustomed for a candidate become elected and then actually fulfill the promises that individual candidate made on a campaign, that elected official is now made on the campaign trail. And that's what's happening here. Let's bring it closer to home, because you touched upon it, Your Honor. The EPA, Long Island's favorite son, Lee Zeldin, he was a longtime state senator. He was a congressman here for 6 years, and for 8 years, and then came within a whisker of taking the governor's mansion in 2022. Amongst the $20 billion that he identified, you mentioned it. A group was there that was tied to former Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams. Probably, if not the first, but in the modern politics since 2000, the second big election denier we had. First was Gore, who tried to deny the victory of George W. Bush, and in fact,
well, let's be fair to Al Gore. He did concede after the Supreme Court ruled. Stacey Abrams has never conceded. So I mean, I don't think you could put Gore in the same category.
I will, if you don't mind, because he still
okay.
And I was there.
Oh no, it's a fight on the show. Oh my God.
I will, but only because he had his minions down on the House floor, urging people, the electors, not to cast their ballots for George W. Bush, even after the Supreme Court issued their decision. So we move forward. Now, Stacey Abrams herself has ties to this group called, and I just had it here, Power Forward Communities. It's a climate change-focused not-for-profit. They received $2 billion. And amongst these $20 billion that Lee Zeldin identified, they had to spend. They were being directed to spend this $2 billion of ties to Stacey Abrams, and the $20 billion, they had to spend it and identify it within 21 days. They were rushing to get the money out the door before the end of the Biden administration. That's just $20 billion that DOGE has identified.
Jesse, you're absolutely right. This is the beginning. This is not one-offs, Jesse and Eric. This is the real deal. What we need is a full-blown investigation of all these NGOs, their ties to political parties. Look, you had I got the signal from the booth, so we're going to have to take a break. But let's talk about the Sheldon Whitehouse, senator from Rhode Island, always trying to jam up the Republican conservative justice on the Supreme Court. They just found out that he directly had legislation that funded an entity, and his wife was making over a couple of $1 billion on that.
This is a guy who has always been claiming that there's a dark web that's been funding that is bribing the Supreme Court to rule against Democratic priorities.
So if you don't think there should be an investigation of this U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, where his wife has direct links, they get all these millions, maybe billions of dollars, and guess what happens? She was paid like $2.3 million for salary. Really, Senator Whitehouse? This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us for more interesting and important conversation.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for a light and fit remix. Like a crunchy storm of graham cookies, caramel pearls, and dark chocolate, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 light and fit remix varieties with craveable flavors and up to 120 calories and 10 grams of protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Custom window treatments are a small upgrade that have a big impact. No better time to shop than now at Blinds.com's Memorial Day Mega Sale. Blinds.com invented a better way to shop for window treatments, completely online with upfront pricing, no showroom markups, no salespeople in your home. Choose from classic shutters to outdoor shades and more, all backed by our 100% satisfaction guarantee. Shop Blinds.com's Memorial Day Mega Sale now. Save up to 50% site-wide, plus a free measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Switching gears, gentlemen, I want to ask this question of you both, starting with Jesse. What's with Trump attacking Zelensky? Why does he call him a dictator? Why is he saying he's not having elections? Why is he making nice to Putin? What's with this deal on minerals? What's going to happen in terms of a ceasefire? Are we going to have peace there, and at what price? So these are very easy questions, so I throw them all to you, Mr. Chairman. Jesse, what are your thoughts?
I think this is Donald Trump and using diplomacy in a way we haven't seen it. First, let's go to the mineral deal. I think this is important for Americans, and I think that we understand. I will tell you, as someone who supported our protection in the Middle East, George W. Bush and his war, and even his father's war, I find it impossible. And even as a young man, I questioned, wait a minute, we went in there, we spent billions of dollars on infrastructure and rebuilding a country and a region, in fact, and we got nothing out of it. We didn't get an oil field out of it to recoup some of the funds that we invested in that to protect and eliminate, protect the people and eliminate a dictator. I think that this mineral deal is something that is a new approach that a businessman needs to have. And I think I know Americans are supporting it. This mineral deal will allow America to go in and mine rare critical minerals that are critical to cell phones, to batteries, to computer chips, something that China has cornered the market on right now. And I believe that is, and I know that this is a move that needs to be made. Now, we'll talk about Trump's language. I think that sometimes if Trump is feeling a resistance from a Zelensky or from anyone else, he's going to use tough language and to try to force him back to a better understanding of his position. And we can't disagree. It has moved. We are within weeks of the United States and Ukraine entering into an agreement on mineral rights that will help fuel our economy. It will help national security, so we have a source of these critical materials that we need for our own manufacturing. And it will lead, and is close to leading, into a peace deal. Listen, the two primary individuals that need to be in this deal are Ukraine and Russia. And by bringing an end to this war, which I believe everyone believes needs to be done. I mean, we have spent somewhere in the area of $350 billion, maybe almost $500 billion, without anything getting back. Now, sure, some of that has been American military, but that was funded for American defense contractors. But there are other aid that we have given into that country that I still believe, and most of Americans are of the opinion, is not accounted for. It's not like we have, a clean, transparent, open, set of books from Ukraine or any other countries that we do foreign aid with and such. But I think it's important, and I think it's critical the way we're moving forward with that. Also, the most critical part of this, I think, is by bringing an end to this war, this coalition that has brought Russia and China together is at least going to be slowed down, maybe even stopped. And I don't disagree, and I don't think anybody disagrees, that it's time for NATO, its countries, to step up and spend more on the national defense as is listed in their charter. In fact, this tough direct talk by both Trump and J.D. Vance, NATO agreed with. The Secretary General came out and said, we need to secure ourselves. We need to invest more in our military. The EU has also said they need to step up and protect themselves and not rely completely on NATO or the United States. So I believe, as we're taping this show on Thursday, the United Kingdom Prime Minister Starmer is with Donald Trump. Both of them reiterated that, there's no greater alliance than the United Kingdom and the United States, and they're a backstop for each of us going forward. That's going to be critical that is critical as we enter into these next new years, especially with the European Union and those countries having to deal with the same issues that we're dealing with here in America.
Eric, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we should start. I think it's important that we start from a set of facts that are undisputed. It can't not be disputed. You could say it, but you'd just be wrong. Putin started the war. Putin invaded Ukraine. Ukraine did not start the war. Now, I find it unhelpful when Trump or anybody says something that is just factually inaccurate. But having said that, the question becomes, what will be the end result? If there is a good result in these negotiations, everyone will forget, and it'll just be in the past, that these statements were made. And if the result is that there is a economic relationship between the United States and Ukraine, and there is a way to find a security mechanism that does deter or will fundamentally deter Russia from ever invading Ukraine again. And the third biggest goal would be to peel Russia away from China. If you can achieve those three, huge success. Big question. I think the most likely one is the one, Jesse, you were talking about. There probably will be be able to negotiate some sort of economic relationship between Ukraine and the United States based on these rare earth minerals. But I also think it's worth noting, for those who are quick to run out there and criticize Donald Trump and his approach to this, I would put forward the theory that the Trump view of Ukraine is identical to the Biden view of Ukraine. Joe Biden screwed this up to a fairly well, putting aside that there's a direct line from the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan to the invasion of Ukraine, when Russia was first surrounding Ukraine and people were encouraging Biden to put sanctions in place. He did nothing because he was afraid of escalation. He then said a minor incursion would be okay. And then when Russia invaded, Biden's initial reaction was to surrender. Remember, he offered Zelensky a ride, and Zelensky said no. Had it been up to Biden, Zelensky would have left, and all of Ukraine would have already fallen to Russia. So then what did Biden do? Biden was always a day late and a dollar short in terms of delivering the weapons. They would say, we need F-15s. And Biden would say, you can't have F-15s. Then a few months later says, okay, you can have the F-15s. All right, but it'll take us 6 months to deliver them. All right, and then once we deliver them, now you can fly them, but only 3 miles away. You can't fly them 5 miles away. All these constraints. So the Biden strategy was, let's make sure that Ukraine doesn't lose, but we will not permit them to win. So what happened with that? It put the Congress in the position of just funding billions and billions of dollars for a war that the president was telling them we don't want to win because we're afraid to escalate. It's the Biden answer to 20th century appeasement and surrender. So at some point, we're going to get the theory that, okay, well, then we have to stop the war because we're fighting a war and people are just dying and there's no chance of victory. Why are a million people dead? So we do have to bring the war to an end. It will involve Ukraine ceding certain territory. The question is how much. And it will involve trying to give Ukraine security guarantees. Now, to me, that's the most complicated issue because Russia has already said they will not permit or agree to NATO forces being in Ukraine for security. Donald Trump has said that there will be no American troops in Ukraine to ensure their security. And Russia has also objected to any American troops being placed there. So the question is, what are the security guarantees? Will they be sufficient? Because we should also harken back to 1994, and this is important. In 1994, Ukraine was the third largest nuclear power on the planet. And in exchange for their giving up the nuclear weapons, the UK and the United States guaranteed Ukrainian sovereignty.
How did that work
out?
How did that work out?
Exactly. How did that work out? So what Zelensky's talking about now is, well, maybe we should bring back our nuclear weapons.
And you know what? From his perspective, he's absolutely right.
And so now we're talking about a nuclear Ukraine. Will Russia allow that? I don't know. If there is no nuclear Ukraine, how are you going to secure their? How are you going to make sure that Russia never invades again? There's been floated this idea that, well, if Russia invades for the third time, automatic NATO membership for Ukraine. The problem with that is the NATO charter requires unanimity.
Yeah, and you have Turkey.
Yeah, and it's not just Turkey, but Turkey in particular. You have to have unanimity of the NATO countries to allow a country into the NATO alliance. So let's just say Turkey. So you can't make that guarantee because then Turkey now has to sign on to that deal.
And they'll shake you down for something.
Well, whether they'll shake you down or not, I think it's highly unlikely they'll agree. So I'm interested in seeing what the security guarantees are for Ukraine. As I said, I'm willing to give a pass on some of these statements that Trump has made, if indeed we get a good result out of it, because after all, this is all about results. And the greatest result for the United States is if in some way we could peel Russia away from China, because historically China was the stepchild to Russia or the Soviet Union. That's now reversed. Russia is now the stepchild to China, and there's a great deal of territory between the Chinese border and the Russian border that's currently recognized as being part of Russia that China has claimed historically as part of it. So they're not the best of friends, but there is still this alliance between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And to the extent that we could break that up in any meaningful way, that would be great for American national security. So I wish the president luck in bringing the war to an end, saving some lives. But I'm very interested in seeing what the security guarantees are going to be for Ukraine.
If I could just jump in before we go in. It's funny you said that it's like the little brother now is Russia to China. Is based on what we've seen in this Ukrainian war, couldn't we say the same thing about that they are the little brother or the shorter cousin to North Korea and Iran, based on they needed them to help bail them out or at least to a stalemate in Ukraine?
Well, the Russians just need bodies. But history is really important. People should read history because it'll help.
Russians are very good at giving up bodies in war.
Exactly. That's how Russia has fought wars. Just ask Napoleon. Russia just throws bodies at you, and they don't care how many people die because life just isn't as precious to them as it is to those of us in the United States or Western Europe or Israel and just general Western civilization. They are prepared to take absorb as many deaths as possible or as necessary to win the war. They don't care how many people die. So, and that includes, we'll take North Koreans. Look, the North Koreans need political cover. They need economic help. They need to feed their people. So in exchange for Russia helping them out politically and with financially, with energy, the North Koreans are sending their troops to Ukraine to fight and die. So, the Russians don't care. And the North Koreans don't care. That's just a family thug business. That's just a racketeering operation. So they don't care how many people die. And so that's kind of what we're facing here. And that's why there's no easy end to the war. And as I said, I really wish the president luck. If he can bring this about, he truly is a Houdini.
Well, let me switch gears. I want to talk to you about the Congress of the United States. There's a very slim majority in the House of Representatives, and is a little bit better, but not a great majority, in the United States Senate. And the big fight they have is this budget bill. And what we're really talking about is an extension of the 2017 tax cuts. And hopefully we're going to be able to have Senator Bill Hagerty on our show. We're waiting to see what's going on in Washington and his availability, and we're going to talk to him about taxes, and we're going to talk to him about Israel. So I want all our listeners to please stay tuned and listen to this, because these are very big deals. This tax bill is a very important bill domestically, and what happens with Israel and what happens with Iran is a very, very big deal for the future of Western civilization. And hopefully the Senate business will allow Senator Hagerty to join us. And Senator Bill Hagerty, ladies and gentlemen, our audience, is an outstanding gentleman. He's one of the great leaders of the United States Senate, former ambassador to Japan, a member of the Banking Committee, the Finance Committee, Foreign Relations. He is, and just a lovely man, outstanding man, and hopefully we'll be able to get him on the show. And we'll be talking to him about this tax bill, and we'll be talking to him about Israel, Iran, Hamas. But to get a little bit more local, Jesse, you have all these people who have announced. I mean, there must be a clown car of about 8 people who've announced that they want to run for the Democratic primary for mayor. And Jesse, before we went on the show, you pointed out to Eric and to me that Adrienne Adams, the Speaker of the City Council, has now put her hat into this ring, and she's now going to have this citywide campaign that she wants a Democratic nomination. Now, let me tell you my thoughts about the city of New York, having had a lot of time to work on this over the years. City of New York needs a strong mayor. It needs a smart mayor. It needs a centrist mayor. As LaGuardia famously said, there's no Democratic or Republican way to collect the garbage. There should not be a Democrat or Republican way to make New York City safe and prosperous. The people, and I call it a clown car because none of these people who've really announced so far are really up to the job, either in terms of ability, experience, temperament, ideology. You have a lot of left-wingers in there. The last thing the city of New York needs is a left-wing mayor. There's some clown, I don't even know his name. He's an assemblyman from Queens. He's a pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas character, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, a democratic socialist. Why the Democratic Party, my party, allows democratic socialists like Bernie Sanders to run for our nominations is beyond me. They want to caucus with the Democratic Party. That's up to the legislative leadership if allowing them in. But I don't think the Democratic Party should allow Democratic socialists in because they're not Democrats. They're the tail that wags the dog. But unfortunately, these tails have dominated the Democratic Party. And Jesse and Eric and I have talked about that before. As long as this tail called the Democratic Socialists, these progressives, these radical leftists control the Democratic Party, and I hope, is doomed to failure because their agenda for the United States is one of weakness. It's one of appeasement, over-taxation, over-regulation. It's a bad agenda for the future of America, and I'm very concerned about that. So Adrienne Adams, as far as I'm concerned, she's a nobody. I was the general counsel and chief counsel, a speaker of the city council who was eligible and capable of being mayor. That was Peter Vallone. All the rest of them, no way, Jose. None of them were capable of being mayor. Adams allowed the city council to go amok, go crazy with all left-wing, anti-cop, anti-energy, anti-housing legislation. They would destroy New York. Right now, what they want to do is they want to abolish the database for gangs held by the police department, which keeps us safe. Let me say that again. You abolish the gang database, then you don't know who these characters are, how to police them. It's a focused study. They just don't have rampant, broad-based sweeps of these people. They know exactly who they are, and large amounts of violence is perpetrated and drugs perpetrated by gangs. And for those people who claim that this is because of this so-called disparate impact, it's more blacks and Latinos are picked up in the gang databases, well, that's because you don't have a lot of Hasidic Jews or a lot of Greeks or these days a lot of Italians or Irish populating, or Chinese populating these gangs. These gangs are really Latino gangs and they're black gangs. And that's the reality of it. You don't have to take my word for it. You read the studies, read what the DAs, who are the honest DAs in New York, are saying about this. We have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in a little while for more interesting conversation, and hopefully we're going to have Senator Hagerty with us in a little while. Please stay tuned.
This is Let the Record Show.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. And we are indeed honored and privileged to have one of my favorite United States senators, Bill Hagerty of the great state of Tennessee, with us. Senator Hagerty, a former ambassador to Japan, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, the Banking Committee, and the Finance Committee, a great leader, a great patriot, a good friend to all of us and to WABC. And Eric, the Senator is all yours for the next 15 minutes.
Well, Senator, thank you for joining us. I mean,
certainly.
Our listeners should know that pound for pound, I think this is probably the single most talented man in the Senate. But unfortunately, not enough people know who he is, so this is an opportunity to get to learn all about that.
Well, thank you, Eric, the Judge, the Chairman. Thank you all for having me today.
So let's start with the Donald Trump's one big beautiful bill in the budget process and what's going on in the House and what is soon to go on in the Senate. So Speaker Johnson, an individual of whom I am a huge fan, was successful in getting a House budget plan out of the House, and it's now on its way to the Senate. The Speaker's view is that there should be one bill, and it's the Senate's view. I think Leader Thune has been the leader on that particular issue, is that it should be broken down into two bills. So where are we on that, and where do you think this is all headed?
Well, we've got two alternatives right now, but I think a lot of the first alternative, that was the Senate putting together a smaller version of the bill, one that would get some of the more immediate needs taken care of, and there I'm particularly talking about the border, some defense spending taken care of, was aimed at the possibility and the concern that it was going to be very hard to get the large bill passed through the House. Speaker Johnson, I think, surprised many people. I'd given it 50-50 odds of whether it would succeed, Eric. But he was able to get it through, and I think he's got a lot. It's much more robust than what we have in the Senate side right now. I haven't had a chance to go through it yet with a fine-tooth comb, but my goal is to get this done as quickly as we possibly can. And if this provides a vehicle where we can get the majority of what President Trump has been talking about done, the majority of what the American people expect done, it's something I'm more than happy to be supportive of.
So do you think it's going to be two bills, or are we going to end up with one?
At this point, I'm not positive, but I'd say we've got a much higher odds of it being one bill now that now that the House of Representatives has succeeded in passing, a much larger vehicle with more in it. We've not had a chance to meet as a committee yet to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, so I don't know the particulars of it. But I think what we have is something that we can work with, something I hope that we can work with. And as I've said in the past, it's certainly not a concern of mine whether it's one, two, or three bills. I just want it done quickly, and that's the direction I'm going to be headed, is what we can get done as quickly as possible.
So I want to put you on the spot here a little bit. You're talking to an almost exclusively New York audience. We love salt. Salt, obviously, in the last bill, 2017 bill, was reduced dramatically, and there was a lot of consternation in New York. Of course, ironically, the people who benefit most from the salt deduction are Democratic voters, well-to-do in the suburbs. But nonetheless, we have a very, very small majority in the House. And what the group that has given us that majority are blue state Republicans, people like Mike Lawler in Westchester County, but Republicans in New York, Illinois, and California. Do you see any loosening of the constraints on salt? Because I happen to agree with you. I think salt is bad policy, but increasing salt may be good politics. Good politics.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, Eric. President Trump definitely broadened the tent when he pulled together the group of people that got him soundly elected. And, if you look at the landslide that he had in the Electoral College, the majority of the popular vote, President Trump brought a lot of people in. And he did that by reaching out and reaching beyond traditional Republican lines. I don't like salt myself. I'm from a no-income tax state. I view this as a subsidy to tax and spender states like California and New York. They would be better off if they got their own houses in order rather than having us subsidize them. With that said, we're far better off having President Trump win the election. And he had to do what he had to do to make that happen. He pulled together coalitions to make it work. And I think it's on us now to roll up our sleeves, cooperate with our friends from New York, from California in the House, who certainly want this for their constituents, and they're going to hold President Trump to that promise. And it's on the table, no question about it.
Well, that's good to hear. So let's move to foreign policy, a topic that I know is very, very important to you. The American-Israeli relationship and the war in Gaza. So the second phase of the ceasefire, I should say the first phase has ended, and we're about to enter the second phase. The second phase envisions Hamas completely surrendering, turning over all their weapons, and turning over all the hostages, and in return, the Israelis completely withdrawing from Gaza. I don't think there's enough fairy dust in the entire universe that's going to make that happen. So the question is, when phase two fails, which I think it ultimately will, in fact, the Israelis announced yesterday that they will not withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. That's the border between Gaza and Egypt, through which all these weapons that got to Hamas came through. Mm-hmm. So it looks like the ceasefire is going to fall apart. Where do you see this going in the short term, medium term, and perhaps the long term?
It's certainly important that stakes be set in the ground, that there are goals and targets laid, as you've articulated, Eric. But here's what's actually happening in my view. I think the conversation is fundamentally shifting. And I know a lot of people's hair was on fire when President Trump talked about developing Gaza, moving people out, et cetera, but that led to a conversation that I had this week with ambassadors from Middle Eastern states. Their leadership is working apace, trying to come up with alternatives now that they've never considered before. And so what I think we're finding is, whether it's what's taking place with Ukraine and Russia right now, whether it's what's taking place in the Middle East, President Trump has come in and jolted the system in such a significant way that we are seeing people looking for creative solutions that actually will work. And it's going to take, I think, a great deal of work. Hamas, I don't see a set of circumstances either that the area flourishes in any respect, as long as Hamas is allowed to remain intact. And their incentives are to continue to use the Palestinian people as fodder, to continue to waste them in terms of keeping themselves, Hamas, in power. It's an untenable situation that is going to have to be addressed. But I'm very pleased to see leaders from other states in the Middle East getting much more involved and coming up with constructive solutions.
See, I think one of the great achievements of the first Trump administration was the Abraham Accords. And the reason why that was successful is because there was a paradigm shift in how the peace was negotiated. Mm-hmm. The theory being that we're going to resolve the issues between Israel and the surrounding Arab states first, and we'll put the Palestinian issue to the side because we don't want to give the Palestinians veto power over peace. I see it with the Trump statement regarding Gazans perhaps leaving Gaza and the United States building big, beautiful condominiums on the Gaza coast as whether is irrelevant to the issue of whether or not you have a paradigm shift. Basically, Trump saying, what we've been trying over the last 80 years has failed.
Not worked, exactly.
And if we continue to do it for the next 80 years, we'll continue to fail. So since I'm the one, Donald Trump, am the one who truly want to make the Gazans' lives better by coming up with creative solutions, those who keep wanting to do the same things over and over again, you guys are of the past, and we need to start moving forward. So do you see it as that's the same kind of paradigm shift that he used when he achieved the Abraham Accords?
I do, and I think you point to the Abraham Accords. That under any other environment would have earned a Nobel Peace Prize for a leader like President Trump. That's just the political environment that we live in right now. But everyone said that would not be possible, and he made it possible. I think it's possible to extend it, and those conversations are actually underway right now as well. So I think that type of fresh framework, that type of new look, I think President Trump is more than happy to come in and shake up the status quo. And I think the pearl clutchers in Washington, D.C. get so upset and they hang on specific words. But what they fail to do is look at what President Trump's intent is. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Eric. His intent is to see the Palestinian people be taken care of. His intent overall is to see peace in the region, and he wants the carnage to stop.
So I think one of the failed policies of the last 80 years that people have been talking about is this notion of a two-state solution. What was interesting is that in 1948, under the partition plan, the Jews said yes, the Arabs said no, the Arabs attacked, tried to destroy Israel, and they failed. In 2000, Arafat was offered a state of his own, and Bill Clinton was very famously said, when Yasser Arafat said to him, Mr. President, you're a great man, and Clinton said, no, I am a failure, and you have made me one, and blamed Arafat for the failure of those talks. In 2005, Sharon withdrew completely every Jew, every Israeli soldier out of Gaza. There hasn't been a Jew in Gaza up until October, from 2005 to October 7th. And in 2008, Mahmoud Abbas was offered an even better deal than Arafat was offered, and he said no. And after each time they said no, the Arabs or the Palestinians declared war. The only thing that kept the two-state solution alive were Israelis who thought that a two-state solution was a possibility if it was going to bring us peace. The Arabs have never, or the Palestinians have never indicated they were interested in two states. They were always interested in a Palestinian state, but only a Palestinian state. Where do you think the talks on the quote-unquote two-state solution are going, to the extent that people are still trying to float that deflated balloon?
I think those talks are going to continue in the salons of Washington and New York and wherever else that foreign policy geniuses happen to be circulating, academics, that sort of thing. And I think they're going to stand and watch economic development ensue. I think that's where the conversations by the Arab neighbors are going, by the way, Eric. Economic development and more opportunity for people. And as that begins to happen and the politics become relatively smaller by comparison, that's the type of success we're going to have to see. You see a normalization agreement between Saudi and Israel take place, suddenly the whole landscape changes in that region. So that's my expectation, is that these people that are mired in their way of thinking, the ones that can't possibly imagine that things could be done differently, the ones that said it was impossible to do the Abraham Accords, they'll continue to say that. They'll continue to do that, and their voices will become less and less relevant.
Senator Richard Weinberg, I want to ask you about what I consider the biggest elephant in the room, and I can't understand what we're waiting for. And that elephant is Iran. They're the source. They're the source of all the problems. We gave them the money to buy off the terrorist proxies. now you read in the newspapers, they're days away, maybe months away from having the ability to put together 6 nuclear weapons. As Eric points out, you need to have a delivery system for them. But why are we giving them so much time when they're in a weakened position? And what should Trump administration do about this?
Well, it's been very interesting to watch this unfold as well. And I really have to give credit to Bibi Netanyahu for ignoring the Biden administration's advice. You know, they kept saying ceasefire, halt, stop. What did the Israelis do? They took out Hezbollah. The sword of Damocles no longer is over their head up to the north with Lebanon. They've dealt with Hamas very aggressively by going in and taking out all of Iran's air protection capabilities. They've exposed the vulnerability of Iran like never before. And now that Syria is no longer under Assad's control, they've actually shut down Iran's ability to move weapons and to continue to fund their proxies and supply their proxies throughout the region. So Iran is significantly weakened right now. The U.S. is in a position to make certain that we are enforcing sanctions. I'm having these conversations this week with Treasury officials. We need to make certain that sanction enforcement, both toward Iran and Russia, become top of mind. The previous administration, the Biden administration, bragged about imposing sanctions on Iran, but they refused to enforce them. So we've got to get back to that posture again. We've talked about this before. When I was U.S. ambassador to Japan, my job was to get the Japanese to stop buying Iranian crude oil. They did. It wasn't an easy set of conversations to have, but we got that done, and we got it done around the world. And we had Iran to the point where they were ready to negotiate. They were at their knees, and it weren't for voices like John Kerry's saying, please wait till after the election. Please wait to see if the Democrats win. I think we would have had a deal done back then. We're getting back to that same place right now, so I think it's maximum economic pressure. I think everybody's watching to see what the Israelis do right now with respect to the nuclear program that is on the ground there in Iran. But they're exposed. The Iranians are exposed in a way that they never have been. So I hear the talk about how close they may be to nuclear capabilities and being able to break out in that manner. But I think Iran needs to proceed extremely carefully at this point.
Well, what's interesting is that the Trump administration, President Trump himself, has said he wants to talk to the Iranians. Now, I personally think that's a complete waste of time and a mistake. You can't rationalize with these people. They'll never give us what we want, but they're very good at wasting time.
Because they let the clock run and they keep developing.
Right. But what was interesting is that the Ayatollah is refusing to speak. He's refusing to have direct talks with the United States. So thank you, Ayatollah, for saying no. So one last question. You made reference to John Kerry. John Kerry had this little sidekick who ultimately became Joe Biden's guy to Iran, and that's Robert Malley. Robert Malley just overnight lost his security clearance without anybody telling him, without the government telling us why. And on May 6th, then Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Mike McCall, along with leader Jim Risch on the Foreign Relations Committee, wrote a letter to Anthony Blinken asking why Robert Malley, our go-to guy on Iran, lost his security clearance, and Blinken stonewalled it. Do you have any idea of what's going on there, what information he may have leaked, why he lost his security clearance, and where that all stands now?
I'm with the two chairmen, McCall and Risch. We need to get to the bottom of this. I certainly think that national security interests were at risk. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lost his security clearance. He's already had trouble. Rob Malley's had difficulty before. He was removed from the Obama campaign back in 2008 because his ties to Hamas were exposed at that point in time. Yet they brought him back into the Obama administration. They used him to draft the so-called Iran deal, the JCPOA. Malley has had his fingerprints over all of this, and it's widely known that his closeness to Yasser Arafat is almost familial. And in fact, he referred to Arafat as his godfather. Arafat and Malley's father evidently were very close friends. So, there's a proximity there that is of deep concern. He had 3 members of the so-called Iran Experts Initiative. This is something that was funded by the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's an influence operation. He had 3 of them in his employ while working for the federal government. In fact, on the way out the door, he sent one over to the Department of Defense as the chief of staff to Special Forces. It was just shocking to me. We called for her to be dismissed, and for her security credentials to be removed. A known member of the Iran Experts Initiative, with email traffic back and forth with the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they embedded these people. They, meaning the Biden administration, embedded these people. It's a matter of grave concern. It's something now that we've got Pete Hegseth, and we're going to soon have Deputy Secretary of Defense Steve Feinberg in. We're going to get to the bottom of this post haste, and the notion that Malley is now in a tenured professor position and not explaining to the American public what he did to lose his security clearance, and if he did something along the lines that I'm concerned about, something that would be tantamount to treason, he should be in a very different place than an academic institution.
For that reason alone, thank God for Republican control. Senator, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor, and we hope to have you back real soon.
Likewise, great to be with all of you.
Senator, thank you on behalf of the chairman, Eric, and myself. It's a pleasure having you with us. This has been Let the Record Show. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with you next week. Thank you.
This is Let the Record Show.